It was a cold October night, the kind where the wind seemed to carry a warning. Samantha, a college student, was driving home after a grueling week of studying. Her usual route took her through a deserted road cutting across a dense forest. The moonlight barely illuminated the path, and her only companions were the hum of the engine and the faint whispers of the trees. Halfway home, something unusual happened. The radio, which had been off, suddenly emitted static. Samantha frowned, but kept driving. Probably just interference, she thought. But then she heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible voice coming through the static, whispering her name. Startled, she turned off the radio immediately. But the voice didn't stop. Samantha, it called, now echoing from all directions, as if the forest itself was speaking. Panic began to creep in. The steering wheel felt heavier, and the air inside the car grew suffocating. Suddenly, something darted across the road ahead of her. It was too fast to be any ordinary animal. She slammed on the brakes, causing the car to skid and stop inches away from a massive tree. Trembling, Samantha scanned her surroundings, but saw nothing, only the oppressive silence of the forest. Determined to understand what had just happened, she grabbed a flashlight and stepped out of the car. The air outside was even colder, and the silence was deafening. She took a few cautious steps toward the edge of the road and noticed deep scratch marks etched into the asphalt. What kind of creature could have done this? She murmured. That's when she heard it again. Samantha ... This time the voice seemed to be right behind her. She spun around, flashlight in hand, but found only emptiness. Yet she felt it, a presence, unseen but undeniable. Without hesitation, she bolted back to her car. Locking the doors, she tried to start the engine, but it refused to turn over. No, please, she begged, frantically twisting the key. Suddenly, the headlights flickered, illuminating a shadowy figure standing in the middle of the road. It was tall and gaunt, with glowing eyes that were anything but human. Before she could react, the figure vanished, but a freezing touch grazed her shoulder. Screaming, Samantha finally managed to start the car and sped away as fast as she could. The radio crackled back to life, playing an old, haunting melody, one she didn't recognize, but that somehow felt eerily familiar. When she finally reached home, she bolted inside and locked every door. She told her friends about the encounter, but none of them believed her. Yet from that night onward, strange things began happening in her house. Whispers in the dead of night, objects inexplicably moving, and, worst of all, that same haunting voice, low and drawn out, calling her name. Samantha ... Samantha tried to carry on with her life after that harrowing night, but the unease never left her. Nights became unbearable. The whispers of her name grew louder, more insistent. On some nights, she'd wake up feeling like something was watching her from the shadows of her room, only for the light to reveal nothing there. Desperate for answers, she started researching the history of the road where it all began. What she found sent chills down her spine. Reports of mysterious disappearances spanning decades, all occurring on October nights. One story in particular stood out, the tale of a man named Victor Holloway, who vanished without a trace on the same road years ago. Some believed he had crashed his car, but his body was never recovered. Curiosity led Samantha to the local library, where she delved deeper into the archives, she stumbled upon an old newspaper headline that froze her in place. Victor Holloway disappears on isolated road. Witnesses report strange behavior. Beside the headline was a blurred photograph of Victor, his eyes staring directly at the camera eyes that seemed unnervingly unnatural. As she read more about Victor, a chill ran down her spine. The whispers started again, faint but unmistakable. Others in the library glanced around uneasily. "Did you hear that?" a woman asked a staff member. Samantha realized it wasn't just in her head anymore. Back home, Samantha knew she couldn't live with the fear any longer. Gathering her courage, she decided to return to the road that very night. Armed with a voice recorder, a camera, and her grandmother's crucifix, she set out, determined to confront whatever haunted her. The forest felt darker than before, as if the moonlight avoided the place entirely. Parking her car at the same spot where it all began, Samantha stepped out into the chilling night. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling as it echoed into the void. At first, there was only silence, but then the recorder picked up static, and the camera began recording on its own. "Victor Holloway," she called out, her pulse racing. The whispers began again, this time a chorus of voices blending into an eerie symphony. From the shadows, a figure emerged slowly. Victor, or what remained of him. His body was distorted, his eyes glowing unnaturally, and a grotesque smile stretched across his face. "Why are you doing this to me?" Samantha asked, her voice cracking. Victor tilted his head, as if puzzled, and then spoke. His voice was a chilling amalgamation of others, layered and echoing. "You called. Now you cannot escape." The trees around her swayed violently, though there was no wind. The ground trembled beneath her feet. She turned to run back to her car, but an unseen force pulled her to the ground. She fell to her knees, her mind overwhelmed by the cacophony of voices.